An important member of the law enforcement family, often undervalued, is the K9 partner. These partners assist law enforcement officers in numerous ways, including narcotics operations, inspecting vehicles, collecting evidence, and assisting in missing person cases and rescue operations. Today, we're joined by James Craigmyle, a former dual-purpose K9 handler. James is internationally certified in narcotics and patrol for our largest sheriff's office in the state of Missouri.
Tonight, we are live in Warwick, Rhode Island.
Featured on LivePD, Craigmyle served as a SWAT K9 handler, and during his career, he worked with federal, state, and local law enforcement officials. Craigmyle has trained hundreds of dogs of all sizes, from personal dogs to law enforcement canines. I'm Patrick Yoes, National President of Fraternal Order Police, and this is The Blue View. Well, James, thanks for joining us today on The Blue View. Tell our listeners a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, I was born and raised here in Ozark, Missouri, which is a small town just south of Springfield, Missouri. Went to high school here. My family grew up around here. My family was a group of either musicians or they were pastors. So I had the both of really good worlds on getting to know people and getting to know the community here and growing up in the area. From there, I went to the military and retired from the Army. Did a couple of tours, one in Afghanistan, one in Iraq, and then started in law enforcement in 2004 with the Greene County Sheriff's Office as a jail deputy, and then moved into patrol and spent close to 17 years active law enforcement. And then I got a job in the private sector, and now I do security in the private sector, as well as I'm still a deputy sheriff. So I still go out and have fun and do all the law enforcement stuff and help the community out and give back to the citizens who support us.
Well, that's great, and thank you for your service, both abroad and also here in law enforcement. K9, I've worked in law enforcement for years, and we all know in law enforcement, we know just how instrumental K9 operations are to modern law enforcement. But I'm just curious, what pulled you into K9? Where does that passion come from?
It comes from the DARE program, as a matter of fact. Being in 6th grade in Ozark, Lenny Frank was the DARE officer's name. He was a Christian County deputy, and he brought his dog, and I wish I could remember his dog's name, but he brought his dog to school. And I thought, what a cool job he has to be able to take his dog with him to work. Now, at the time, I didn't comprehend what a dog does or what a canine does, but I knew that I liked dogs. I knew that I wanted to be in law enforcement, and the passion of coming together, I'm like, I'm going to make that happen one day. Typically, for myself at least, if I set a goal, I try to achieve that goal, whether it's a short-term or a long-term goal, or whether it's a difficult goal or an easy goal. And that was a difficult goal because, as people understand, to get into law enforcement, you've got to have a clean background. You go through the psych eval and a PT test. And so just to get into law enforcement is not as easy as some people may think. And then to be a coveted canine handler is a little bit more difficult because those jobs are few and far between. And you got to be in good physical shape, good mental shape, good stamina. So to get that job, you really got to work hard at it. And I knew it was something that I wanted to do. And I was fortunate enough that our sheriff at the time was starting a canine program, and I was able to get in on the groundwork of that and the foundation. So everything started from a little boy in Ozark, Missouri, going through the DARE program at 6th grade. And I just enjoyed it so much that I knew that's what I wanted to do.
Yeah, and it takes a special person for it as well. It takes a lot of characteristics necessary to be successful in this. K9 has a lot of different avenues, a lot of different skill sets that are brought to policing. You talk a little bit about the role of a K9 and what they bring to modern law enforcement.
Yeah, the K9 is one of the most useful tools that law enforcement has to them. Not only, everybody sees the K9s and they want to see them go bite somebody, or they want to see them go do something cool like you see them jumping out of helicopters or scaling walls or something like that. What I think is cool is you're taking a living, breathing creature, 4 legs and a nose and a tail, and you are teaching it. These dogs don't know anything whenever they get them in law enforcement. But you take that dog and you teach it in their language, because if they spoke the language that we speak and had thumbs, they'd drive their own cars, but they don't do that. So we have to understand how to communicate with those dogs. So to communicate with them and to get them to use their nose is their life. A blind dog could still be a patrol dog. A deaf dog could still be a patrol dog, because a dog uses their nose, their sense of smell. That's their entire world. So to go out and to find a missing kid, to track that kid who has taken off from home and got lost in the woods, or to track that missing elderly person who's walked off from the Alzheimer's unit or from their home, that's the rewarding part right there. Yeah, finding the bad guys is cool. Biting the bad guys, yeah, that can be fun. But using your dog to do good for the community, to find those missing kids, to find those missing adults, and the hours that it takes, the determination, the grit, the patience. Patience is a big thing. And just to hone in on that dog's skills is something unremarkable. That's not anything that anybody can else do. You know, we have trackers out there, human trackers that can track people. But you get somebody out there in some of these woods in Louisiana or Florida or Missouri here, it's difficult. So you take a partner and you teach them and you train them. That is the most rewarding thing. And I would venture to guess that most handlers across the United States would say the same thing. Finding those missing kids, finding those missing adults that are gone, or using your dog as a tool to locate evidence or articles from a crime, whether it be a rape or a homicide. You find that smoking gun, or you find the knife that was used. That's the rewarding part for me, especially.
You know, I've over the years, I have watched canines in a lot of different roles, from detection to tracking to even soothing. There's something about a canine that people can connect to. Talk about maybe some of your experiences in these different areas, something that comes to your mind where the canine has performed this role that just wouldn't be possible if, without them.
Right. We had a gentleman who came into the sheriff's office. For whatever reason, his son wasn't in school that day, and they came to the sheriff's office because they wanted to file a complaint. I happened to be a K9 handler as well as the public information officer at the time, and whenever the dad came in, I went up to try to talk to the kid. I was going to give him a badge and some other stuff, and the dad looked at the kid and he told the kid, "Don't talk to him. You're not allowed to talk to people like him." And I already knew at that point that the dad didn't like law enforcement. And it's unfortunate because the kids, whenever a child is born, a child isn't taught hate. A child isn't taught to not like something. They might not like the way that it tastes or the way that it feels, but the feeling that you have for a person, that's something that is learned. That is a behavior that child observes their parents doing. And I knew that I wanted to try to integrate myself with this child and show this child that law enforcement isn't bad. Not all cops are bad cops. And luckily I had my partner with me. The dad allowed the kid to pet my dog, but he wouldn't allow him to talk to me. So I'm always an advocate on a good canine team, one that is a sociable canine team. And don't get me wrong, all dogs will bite. Even dogs that are not canine dogs will bite. But as long as you have a good control of your dog and a good rapport with your dog, and you can build that relationship or bridge that gap between that child who comes in with their parent who hates cops, who hates law enforcement, and you can use that dog as a tool to de-escalate dad's negativity that he's impacting upon his son. Or you go to a school and you have a kid come up to you and you say, "You took my daddy to jail." And you might not have been the one to take their daddy to jail, but all they see is you as a law enforcement took my daddy to jail. But you've got a dog, and now this child likes dogs. So they can relate to the dog. They might not be able to relate to you, but you can take that time that child is interacting with your police canine and talk to the child, because now you get that child's attention. You've grasped that kid and you can make an impact with your dog with that kid. There was a night, it was on a LivePD episode, where we had stopped a vehicle on a residential street. The guy in it refused consent to search. They called for my dog and I to come over. We ran the dog around the car, got a positive indication, probable cause to search the vehicle. Right across the street from there, no kidding, right across the street, less than probably 25 feet, is a lemonade stand. So I took the opportunity, because the kids are seeing the negative, the evil, the bad impact that this citizen has brought to their neighborhood with the drugs and the traffic stop. And I went over with my dog to try to form a bond with these kids, to let these kids know that we're doing a job, but we're people too. We're people just like their mom and dad. We've been little kids before. And I took the rest of the officers or the deputies over there, and we bought lemonade from the kids, and they got to play with the dog. And it was just a win-win. So you're right in the aspect of a good canine team can bridge a gap between the community and law enforcement. At least in my eyes, they can.
You know, you refer to or relate to a specific incident where you know that a canine has given a different outcome of what perceived impressions. I share one as well, where an autistic child slipped away, went through the woods, and just got himself lost, and tracked him down with a canine. But that's really not where the story ends. We're successful in finding him. The interaction that he had with the canine, with the dog, just was so touching that the canine officers actually went out and found a rescue and trained it and gave it to him, and just changed his life, that interaction. So look, there's one, there's example after example after example of how canines are not only effective and efficient in a law enforcement role, but how they're also go so much further and with the interaction and just the soothing of incidents. So great examples. You mentioned LivePD. LivePD is, I guess, probably arguably the most open and frank view of a law enforcement officer and their operations on a daily basis, unvarnished. And you've appeared on there a few times over the years. And talk a little bit about LivePD, how you got to be involved with LivePD, and maybe some takeaways, some lessons that you may have to share from being on that episode.
Well, this was a time right whenever the Ferguson incident happened with the Brown case, and being here in Missouri with Ferguson, law enforcement, it was difficult to recruit people. It's very, very difficult to recruit individuals who want to come put themselves in harm's way for a stranger that they don't know, potentially risking their own lives, not knowing if they're going to go home and see their kids. Who wants to do that now? But there's a lot of people out there that do. There are a lot of people who have that in their blood, who have that calling. And I went to the sheriff, and I told the sheriff, I said, we have an opportunity here. I didn't know what LivePD was. I've been watching Cops, before, but Cops is always edited. They always take the fun stuff, the car chases and the foot pursuits and the wrestling and everything else that you see, and they cut it up and they put it in a 30-minute segment, and you get to watch it. And I started watching LivePD. Sean Larkin was on at the time, and some of the other officers that everybody has come to know and love were on there. And I told the sheriff, I said, I think it'd be great if we get him here. It'd be a good PR. It'd be a good way to showcase our agency and allow our citizens to see what we do on a daily basis. So I was the public information officer. I started tagging LivePD on different posts that we were doing and trying to figure out a way to reach out to them, because I had no idea how to reach out to a national television agency. So it was kind of a mutual coming together between LivePD and Greene County, and the sheriff read over all of the stipulations, and we had meetings with them, and it came about to where they said, okay, we want to come and we want to follow your agency. And the sheriff said, let's do it. So that's how it came about. And, who doesn't love canine teams? So LivePD said, we want canine teams. We would love to see different deputies, different areas. We're not going to interfere with everything. You do what you normally do on a daily basis. We're just documenting it and recording it live for the citizens to watch. And, it became an increasing success, because people all over the United States could relate to what's going on in either Richland County or Salinas County or Greene County or Pinal County. It doesn't matter what county, it doesn't matter what city, it doesn't matter what state they were following. The stuff that we were doing is the stuff that goes on in their neighborhoods. People could relate to that. They could relate to us because not only are we just, running in there and saying you're under arrest and this is why you're going to jail and taken to jail. We're actually able to talk to the camera. We're actually able to talk to the community and let them know what we're doing and why we're doing it. Not just going in there and just say, well, because I got a badge and you're under arrest because you violated this law. There was also a little bit of education. There's a little bit of the behind the scenes stuff of the traffic stop and why we get to search their car, or what gives us probable cause or reasonable suspicion to detain a person or to arrest a person. And I think that's why it was such a huge success, because there wasn't any cutaways. There's no redos. There wasn't, oh, you know what? I'm sorry. I shouldn't have said that. I shouldn't have done this. And it was the transparency of what we do as law enforcement, because you look across the entire United States and we're all doing the same thing. It's all the same job. It's kind of like football. It's like basketball. You're a team and you're all doing the same thing. Yeah, you live in a different state. You got a different teammate, but it's still the same concept. And that's what law enforcement is. And I think that's why LivePD was a huge success.
Yeah, law enforcement is one of those jobs where ordinary people are do a pretty mundane job most of the time, and but are called upon to do some pretty extraordinary things at times. So it's definitely an unusual quality for a person to be in this role. Over the past 2 years, we've had so much unrest in this country, so much demonization of law enforcement and the things that we do. And K9 wasn't exempt from that. I remember quite often being asked the question, why do we have K9s? Why is that necessary? And it's because they focused on a negative portion of what it is. But as we've illustrated through this, time and time again on our examples just in the last few minutes, of just what a role K9s play in law enforcement. It's not all about that bite. It's not all about the the apprehension. It really is about a whole bunch of different aspects. What do you tell someone when they say, you know what, K9s maybe don't have a place in a law enforcement agency?
So a good K9 team can de-escalate a situation quickly to where you have less use of force against somebody. So you have lethal force or less lethal force. A good K9 team can de-escalate a situation quickly, whether it's a pursuit, whether it's going into a domestic, whether it's somebody who's wanting to assault a law enforcement officer. I have a good example. I've got called up to one of the deputies that had a traffic stop. During the traffic stop, one of the gentlemen was giving him a fictitious name. So he runs him through mules, comes back and finds out that Social Security number doesn't match up to the name or the date of birth. So we get there and he says, I'm going to pull this guy out and talk to him for a little bit. So whenever I get there, I get my dog out because the deputy says he told me that if he has warrants, he's not going to jail. Well, it's hard to figure out if he has warrants if he's not giving us his real name. So we show up, my partner and I do. I get my partner out and I ask my partner to bark. I tell him, geblout, speak loud. So he does. The occupants in the car can hear him. They now know that I have a K9. We ask the passenger to step back to us because we don't want to reapproach the car. So we ask the passenger to step back to us. We get the passenger handcuffed and he's just sitting there just staring down my dog. And he looks at me and he says, if it wasn't for your dog, he said, I was going to give you both a fight for your life. So that goes to show right there that he de-escalated, my dog de-escalated the situation to where nobody got injured. Nobody got a bump. Nobody got a bruise. Nobody got an abrasion. Nobody had to be tasered. Nobody had to be maced. It was just the mere presence of the K9 that de-escalated the situation. Numerous times whenever we go on calls, a person who would normally want to fight us or continue fighting their spouse or continue beating their children, whatever the case might be, de-escalates quickly. Also, if you want to talk about taxpayers' money, which is what police law enforcement is funded off of, a good K9 team can reduce man hours from law enforcement. A good K9 team, a dog and a handler, can cover that beat or that district more efficiently and sometimes more effectively than just one officer, because now that deputy has instant backup there. That deputy, the canine handler, has that canine in the car, and that's their backup. Yes, that canine might not be able to write down and take notes. Yes, that canine might not be able to give you advice, but that canine is there to de-escalate a situation pretty quickly to where you're not tying up another deputy or another officer or another trooper from their zone or their beat on another call. So if you want to talk about taxpayers' dollars and saving taxpayers' money, what better way than to have a canine who can locate that missing kid or that adult, who can conduct a building search more quickly than we can, be more efficient than we are, get the fentanyl, get the meth, get the cocaine off of the streets better than what we humans can, and do it in a less amount of time. So it's saving the taxpayers money, which is one of the big complaints that citizens have is, well, it's just a waste of my money, or I pay your salary, or you hear it all the time. And that's great. I appreciate you paying my salary. I pay my salary too, because I pay taxes as well. But to say that a canine has no use in law enforcement or shouldn't be used in law enforcement, I've got a rebuttal for every reason why they shouldn't be.
And a really good rebuttal. If anybody who's worked in law enforcement more than 3 minutes knows just the role that K9 plays. Interesting. I think most people in law enforcement recognize this, but for our listeners that are not, the bond between a handler and a K9 is something that develops over time. And it's not just something that's during the patrol hours as well. That's a bonding that happens even after hours. So, if you could kind of share the relationship with you and your K9 on an average full day, full week, it's you're never really separate.
No, you're not. It goes to say that you're usually with your canine partner more than you are your spouse or your children. To walk you through the generality of a canine team, the handler is selected through whatever means that the agency selects the handlers. And then usually your senior and handler, your instructor, they will go select a dog for you. Wherever they go to select the dog, whether it's in the U.S. or outside of the United States, if they go to the pound and test some dogs at the dog pound and use a dog pound dog, or it's donated. That handler from day one has to form a bond with that canine before they can even start training. So you're feeding it, you're cleaning its kennel, you're out there talking to it. I remember the first night that I got my partner, there was a horrible thunderstorm. Well, I can't have this dog inside my house because I don't know it. It doesn't know me. I do know that this dog knows how to bite people. And that's the last thing that I want to do because I don't know how to get this dog off me if he bites me. So he's in a kennel outside. It's pouring down rain, lightning cracking everywhere. My dog is howling, and I lived in a subdivision. The last thing that my neighbors want is my police canine, who I just got first night, mind you, howling at the top of his lungs in the backyard with the lightning going, with the rain pouring. So I am out there on a stool with a poncho, feeding and comforting my dog as much as I can, letting him know that I'm with him. And that's what started the bond. And a lot of handlers will do that. A lot of handlers will have to go out of their way to establish that bond with the dog. But after you fed that dog all day, you give it water, you go out there and you do tracks on it. The dog relies on you just as much as you rely on it. So you start your day out, you wake up, you've got to either go outside, or if your dog is inside, you got to let your dog out to use the restroom. You got to feed him. You got to brush him. You got to look them over, because what happened the night before, that bump or bruise or abrasion, because they were jumping up in an attic after a suspect, or they were crawling underneath a house, that might not show up till the next day. Or maybe they got a splinter the night before and it didn't fester up or it didn't manifest itself until the next day. So now you're manipulating your dog's paws, you're looking at their feet, you're looking at their teeth, you're checking to make sure that your dog is good to go, the same as you would do with your patrol car with the oil changes, or your tires, or checking your duty weapon. Make sure that you got all your rounds in your duty weapon, making sure that all of your gear is serviceable. You have to do that with your dog. It's just your gear doesn't have a mind. It doesn't think. It doesn't breathe. It doesn't rely on you like the dog does. So that bond of you guys, the handler and the dog, going into some of the most severe types of weather and condition and environments, that dog, it can go licking the water in a stream or a pond, but it can't go eat by itself unless it's eaten out of the wild. So, you go on calls, you're training, you're rewarding your dog. The dog relies on you for love and rewarding and comfort. The old days of the handlers and the dogs that are just angry and mean all the time and hateful and wanting to bite everything, that's all gone to the wayside. We look for dogs now that are sociable. We look for dogs that we can take into schools, that we can take into hospitals. We do it safely, mind you, but we look for those types of dogs when we test them because we want to bridge that gap. And that dog knows that. That's why we don't get those jerk dogs, those angry, hateful, snarling dogs anymore. That is a thing of the past. And the new future, the new handlers are coming up. They see it and they understand it. And I think that helps build a better, more tighter bond with the handler and the dog themselves. You're taking them to the vet. You're sitting there and holding them whenever they're getting their shots, or you're putting their muzzle on and they're looking at you with a muzzle on, because now that you've taken their fight away, now they don't have a way to fight. So they're relying on you to protect them and to comfort them. Because believe it or not, I know that they're police canines. I don't care if it's a military working dog or a law enforcement working dog, a search and rescue dog. Those dogs have feelings. They care. They feel pain. They can sense your emotions, and everything inside your body runs down that leash to that dog. And that's why you got to comfort that dog in those times. And that helps build the bond as well.
Well, and that bond is unconditional.
It is.
And let me give an example. Just in my agency, we had a handler by the name of Roy Gautreaux who had a canine by the name of Freckles. And Freckles had a great attitude, great disposition, and it would have been easy for Freckles. And I used to tell this story to kids all the time. It'd be easy for Freckles to say, you know what, nobody loves me. He'd been brought to the pound twice. He pushed around until finally, one day, he caught the attention of a canine handler and said, you know what, this dog has what it takes. And Freckles became an inspiration to kids all across my jurisdiction because it just had unconditional love for everyone and just a perfect attitude, and people could relate to it. And it would be easy to say, nobody wants me, but it never let that attitude change who Freckles was meant to be. Yeah, so it's a great one to end this segment up on. James, if somebody wants to learn more about K9 or even yourself, what can we direct them to?
Yeah, so I'm on all the social media channels. I'm on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. There's a lot of imposters out there. Since LivePD, a lot of us officers that were on LivePD, our social media channels or apps out there, they try to imitate us or they try to steal our pictures or whatever. Mine's all verified. I've got the blue check mark on all my social media pages. I've got my K9 page, Craigmyle K9 Training, and they can keep up with us on there. I try to respond to a lot of their requests and the questions and stuff. Sometimes there's a lot that I get inundated with, but we keep up with that. Project K9 Hero. I just did a show with Project K9 Hero through Great American Country. Look for it soon. It's going to showcase military working dogs and law enforcement working dogs, and some of the awards that they received this year on Great American Country. And I can't wait for everybody to see that. It's going to be an amazing show. People are going to cry. If you don't cry, then you just have no feelings or emotions. It's going to be a great show, though.
Well, thank you for being such an advocate, a great advocate for law enforcement and what we do, and for the K9 profession as well.
Be sure to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or anywhere else you get your podcasts. To get the latest from the National FOP, make sure to follow us on Twitter and Facebook at GLFOP and on Instagram at FOP National. Thanks again. We'll see you next time.